Imagine having a kind of biological GPS, a super precise map to the exact spot where each of us was created. Now, what if I told you that map was written down over 1,400 years ago? Today, we're going to explore a really incredible connection between an ancient text and modern anatomy, one that kind of challenges our whole sense of time and knowledge. So let's start with a really basic question. Where were you created? I mean, exactly. Most of us would just say, oh, in my mother's womb. And that's true, of course. But what if that answer misses a much more specific, much more protected reality? A reality that was described with shocking accuracy centuries before we ever had the tools to actually see it. And this is what's so fascinating. A text from way back in the 7th century describes this location with incredible precision. It doesn't just say the womb. It says we are all created within 3 darknesses, 3 distinct layers of darkness. So the question is, what are they? Here it is. This is the specific text from Surah Az-Zumar. It says, "He creates you in the wombs of your mothers, creation after creation, within 3 darknesses." The key phrase here, the one that really stands out, is that very specific count, 3 darknesses. Not just darkness in general, but exactly 3 of them. Okay, so to understand this, we need to switch gears a little bit. We're going to jump from this ancient text to modern science. Let's take a look at the actual anatomical blueprint of how a fetus is protected, based on what embryology tells us today. What modern science shows us is that to get from the outside world to a fetus, you have to pass through some very specific, very distinct biological barriers. And, well, as it turns out, there are exactly 3 of them. Okay, so barrier number 1, the anterior abdominal wall. This is the body's first line of defense, right? You've got layers of skin, fat, and powerful muscle that shield all the internal organs. It's this dynamic, living wall that protects against any outside bumps and pressures. So that's our first layer. Then you go deeper inside. Past that abdominal wall, you find the second barrier, the uterine wall. And this isn't just another layer of muscle. This is the womb itself, a super strong, dynamic organ that's literally designed to protect and nourish. It's a serious second shield, completely separate and distinct from the first one. And finally, we get to the third and the most intimate barrier of them all, the amniochorionic membrane. This is that delicate but tough sac that holds the amniotic fluid. It's the final shield, creating this private, self-contained little world where the fetus can just safely float and grow, totally buffered from everything else. So why use the word darkness? Well, it turns out it's anatomically literal. Each of these 3 layers, the abdominal wall, the uterine wall, and that amniotic membrane, is completely opaque. Light just can't get through them. So they create a completely pitch-black environment for the fetus. Okay, so we've got 2 pieces of information sitting side by side. We have an ancient text describing 3 darknesses, and we have modern anatomy identifying 3 distinct protective walls. So let's see how they connect. And when you lay it out, the correlation is just striking. The first darkness lines up perfectly with the first anatomical barrier, the abdominal wall. The second darkness maps directly to the uterine wall. And the third darkness, well, that corresponds to the innermost barrier, the amniochorionic membrane. It's a direct one-to-one mapping. It's incredible. Now, of course, it's really important to consider other interpretations. You have to ask, right? Is this a genuine correlation, or could it just be a lucky guess, a poetic coincidence? Let's take a second to explore the skeptic's view. So a perfectly fair counterargument is that 3 darknesses is just, poetic language. In this view, it's a metaphor for a very dark and mysterious place, not a literal count of anatomical layers. The argument is that we're just finding a scientific pattern where none was ever intended, that it's all just a really compelling coincidence. But how well does that counterargument really hold up when you look at the specifics? See, the real strength of this correlation isn't just in the idea of darkness, but in the precision of the number itself. So you've basically got these 2 perspectives. On the one hand, you have the view that the phrase is vague, it's poetic, it's a coincidence. And on the other hand, you have the view that the most logical interpretation is that it's actually a precise anatomical description. The whole debate really hinges on whether you see it as coincidence or correlation. So here's the crucial point. There's this principle called Occam's razor, which basically says the simplest explanation is often the best one. And the most direct, physical interpretation of 3 darknesses surrounding a fetus is the 3 anatomical walls that surround it. And the count is exact.
Anatomy confirms there aren't 2 or 4, but precisely 3 distinct protective layers. The number isn't approximate, it matches reality.
And that really brings us to the key takeaway here. The description isn't just general, like in the belly, it's specific, inside 3 biological shields. What we're looking at is a precise anatomical count, written in the 7th century, that just happens to align perfectly with what medical science would discover over 1,000 years later. So we're left with this one last question to think about. What does it mean when a text from the 7th century contains a specific number that aligns so perfectly with a scientific discovery made more than a millennium later? Is it a remarkable coincidence, or is it a glimpse of knowledge that seems to defy its own time? That is a fascinating thing to consider.